All right. Okay. Thank you, Vincent. Great to be here. And Bishop Gregory, it's an honor to be here. It coincided. We originally, Dr. Ann Borick and I had scheduled this, I think, for next week. And then we had to change it, and so we got this date instead. So it's great that I was here for that special, very special liturgy. It's a beautiful liturgy, isn't it? I mean, it really is. I mean, a lot of meaning, a lot of explanation, a lot of teaching, and you can also see that the bishop is a teacher, and also knows how to step in at the right moment when we're delayed and come in and give an excellent presentation on the different rites. So great to be here. And Vincent, former student, when did you graduate, by the way?
When did I graduate? 2017.
2017, all right, 2017. And he overlapped with my son, Paul, who's over here. And Paul works at the center. And Paul graduated in the COVID year, right, from St. Vincent College. And that was the year without commencements, by the way. My son, Mitch, graduated the same year at Grove City College, and there was no commencement that year. So they had to hold them. They did them they did virtual commencements that year. It was just a strange time. But it's great to be here, and to have a center committed to St. Sharbel in this area is just tremendous. I mean, what a great gift, right? Truly. And I think more people need to know about this, but that's what's going on now. So Vincent and Paul and Dr. Borick and Bishop Gregory, that's all part of the mission right now, is to get more people to know about this and learn about this great saint. Okay, so I'm here today to talk to you about communism, socialism, how the Catholic Church confronted the two of them, the two ideologies, very related ideologies. And I guess I have until about 12 o'clock, right? I believe. Okay, so time to go through some PowerPoint slides and also take questions. I'll take whatever questions you have. So I have got about, how many slides I got here altogether? 27 slides altogether. All right. So we'll start with this. I don't know how well you can see that. And by the way, I can give you all a copy of this if you'd like. So I could email it to you. Vincent could email it to you. Paul could. So if you don't take notes quick enough, don't worry about it. All right, we could send it to you. Feel free to take pictures of this, of any of these quotes, whatever you need. But it all begins with the Communist Manifesto, published in February 1848, and by which authors? Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, right? So everybody remembers just Marx, but Marx had a partner in this, Friedrich Engels. And in fact, Engels was more than a partner. Engels was his chief financier. I mean, that's where Marx got all of his money from Engels. And actually, Engels got it from Engels' father. And Engels' father was a kind of wealthy industrialist, left money to his son. Marx never held a job. He couldn't put a roof over his head for his family. He was always getting money first from his parents, and then when his father died, that money ran dry. So then he went to his wife's parents, and they gave him money over and over and over again. And finally, they got to a point where they told Marx's wife, Jenny, "I'm sorry, but we can't give you any more money." All right. In fact, Jenny, Marx's wife, and Marx's mother both expressed the wish that Karl would start earning some capital rather than just writing about capital. So he never did, refused to get a job, refused to pay the rent. The family got kicked out of every different place. So Engels, if it wasn't for Engels, you really wouldn't have all of this, because he became basically Karl Marx's sugar daddy, gave him the money to do what he did. So 1848, they published the Communist Manifesto. They weren't sure what to call it. And in some of the original correspondence between Marx and Engels, Engels said to Marx, "Give a little more thought to our communist confession of faith." Confession of faith. Can you guys hear me okay, by the way? Is this mic on? Oh, that might be better. There we go. Okay, all right, good. Yeah, he said, give a little more thought to our communist confession of faith. That's what they called it originally. He said, I think we should drop the catechetical form and call it just the manifesto. But originally they used this religious-like language. Ronald Reagan and others, Ronald Reagan would say, well, yeah, Marxism, Leninism, that religion of theirs. And it's ironic because they hated religion, they attacked religion, but they treated their Marxism, Leninism as a kind of religious faith. So this would be their communist confession of faith. They open up the book with these kind of chilling words. A specter is haunting Europe, the specter of communism. So they describe it as a specter, a type of spirit, a ghost. And then these are the opening words. This is the opening words of the book. All the powers of old Europe have entered into a holy alliance to exorcise this specter, like an exorcism. And they named French radicals Metternich, Guizot, Pope and Czar. They named the Pope first. And Holy Alliance, this was language that went back to the Congress of Vienna, 1818, post-Napoleon. So they were entering into a holy alliance to exorcise this specter. So they're actually speaking about their ideology as this specter that needs exorcised, which would be a demon of all things. Haunting Europe. They wrote, the entire theory of the communists may be summed up in a single sentence. I was in D.C. this past week, and I was with the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, and they asked me, they said, when you're asked to give a definition of communism, there's a lot of debate about that. How do you define it, right? What definition do you use? I said, just go to the manifesto. They said it can be summed up in a single sentence. Abolition of private property. 4 words. Now, right then and there, first of all, you're going against biblical and natural law. I mean, the 10 Commandments says, thou shalt not steal. So we have a right to property. And they base their entire theory, grounded on the idea of abolishing private property. And I can tell you right there, and most people could tell you, right? If you go on a crusade to abolish private property, you're going to have to kill a lot of people. All right? I mean, that's just like a non-starter to begin with. I mean, one of my students was turning in a paper saying, my entire thesis of this paper is going to be to abolish private property. So, yeah, bad idea. You're going to need guns, you're going to need gulags, and you're going to need to kill a lot of people to abolish private property. I mean, the whole world, everything is set on your ability to be able to own some stuff. Your property, your house, your things, from which you can exchange, commerce, trade things, barter, right? And then they say, you are horrified at our intending to do away with private property. Well, precisely so, because that is exactly what we intend to do. Exactly what we intend to do. According to Marx and Engels, and also Vladimir Lenin, who came later, and I put this on the slide early because people often ask me this question later on. Socialism, which like communism favors what they call public ownership or government ownership of the means of production. According to Marxism, Leninism, socialism is just the final step toward communism. So you'll meet a lot of people today who'll say, well, I'm not a communist, I'm a democratic socialist, right? Well, according to these guys, if you're a socialist, you're going to communism. Marion Smith, who used to be with the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, used to say, as the Christian aspires to heaven, the socialist aspires to communism. That's kind of the communist paradise, right? So the socialist seeks, right, the highest form of existence, communism. Again, Reagan, Marxism, Leninism, that religion of theirs. They treated it like a religion. In the manifesto, Marx and Engels said that communism seeks to abolish the present state of things. You'll often hear this, you guys have probably run into this, right? You ask a young person who says, I think communism's a pretty good idea. It talks about sharing, right? Sharing and love and helping your fellow man. No, if you read the book, I mean, it talks about abolition, criticism, abolishing private property, capital, states, societies, abolishing the present state of things. They said the communist revolution is the most radical rupture with traditional relations and traditional ideas. The most radical rupture with traditional relations and traditional ideas. The most radical. They close the book. The communists disdain to conceal their views and aims. Think about this phrase. They openly declare, all right? They openly declare that their ends can be attained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. All existing social conditions, forcibly overthrow all of them. I was talking to Jordan Peterson about this, right? This is like pure destruction. This isn't just, well, we need to tax the rich a little bit more, maybe tinker with Social Security. They want to use force to overthrow all existing social conditions. Didn't they realize how radical this is? Yeah, they said it in the opening lines. He said, this is the most radical idea out there. And people today in our university was like, oh yeah, it's a pretty cool idea. They just talk about sharing. No, there's nothing more radical than this. Marx called for the ruthless criticism of everything that exists. Everything. You probably didn't know that this was in there in the book. They talk about home education, religious education. Marx and Engels. Do you charge us with wanting to stop the exploitation of children by their parents? To this crime we plead guilty. But you will say we destroy the most hallowed of relations when we replace home education by social. Back in these days, people were educated at the home. And Marx and Engels and the communists wanted to end homeschooling way back then. They also wanted to end religious schooling, which they would, Bolsheviks in Russia and everywhere else. Everybody was to be put in the government collective, the secular, atheistic, hostile to religion government collective. And there, in order to destroy the exploitation of children by their parents and to get rid of religious and home education, they would learn the new world, the new idea. There's a 10-point plan in the Communist Manifesto. And the last point calls for free education for all children in public schools. 1848. 1848. You're way ahead of us. Way ahead of us. Marx railed against what he called the disgusting bourgeois claptrap about the family and education and the hallowed correlation of parent and child. In fact, the relationship between parent and child is hallowed. It is sacred. That's what our faith teaches. These guys sought to destroy that. They hated religion. What did Marx call religion? Opiate of the people. The opium of the people. The full line, religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world. Religion is the soul of soulless conditions. It is the opium of the people. So this idea that, well, I could see maybe Marx just didn't really like religion. He's a non-believer. Yeah, he sees that people kind of need religion as a kind of drug or crutch. No, he hated religion. Religion was the heart of a heartless world, soul of soulless conditions. By the way, Raymond Aron, the conservative writer, said, I'll tell you what opium is. The opium of the intellectuals is Marxism. How about that? Marx said, communism begins where atheism begins. And Marx had a favorite quote. Marx had a favorite writer. Marx actually wanted to be a poet. And he wanted to be nothing less than the Goethe of his age. Goethe wrote a book called, anyone know? Right? Faust, right? The Faustian Bargain. And in Faust, his demonic character, his devil character was Mephistopheles. Marx was obsessed with Mephistopheles. When Marx was asked if he had a favorite quote, right, maybe ask me for my favorite quote, Bishop Gregory, maybe ask Vincent, Paul, right? We give you maybe a scripture verse, a quote from a saint, Saint Sharbel, be not afraid, something like that. Marx said, yes. Mephistopheles in Faust, my favorite line. Everything that exists deserves to perish. Everything that exists deserves to perish. His daughters would say, oh, he would chant Mephistopheles. We'd be on walks and he'd be imitating and chanting Mephistopheles. That's a weird guy. That's a messed up dude. All right? I did a book called The Devil and Karl Marx. I have it here with me. And people say, isn't that a little hyperbole? I'm like, no, not at all right? The guy was obsessed with guy wrote poems about the devil, right? It's crazy what the guy believed. Vladimir Lenin, who would become the implementer of Marxism when he and the Bolsheviks took over, said, all worship of a divinity is a necrophilia. Y'all know what that is? There's kids here, I won't go through describing it. Yeah, love of the dead. There is nothing more abominable than religion. He quoted Marx. He said, like Marx said, religion is the opium of the masses. Religion is a kind of spiritual booze. It is medieval mildew. That stuff that those superstitious idiots in the Catholic Church, the other churches, believe. They didn't like the family. Marx wrote in a letter to Engels, who didn't have a family, Marx said, blessed is he who has no family. Marx had several children, and Marx is the only figure that I've ever met who had two daughters who committed suicide in suicide pacts with their husbands. Really messed up. He also impregnated the family nursemaid, Lenchen, behind the back of his wife, Jenny. And Lenchen wasn't paid a penny because Marxism, Marx, the champion of the working class and of the working man and the proletariat, never paid anybody anything. And in fact, the reason that they had Lenchen as the family nursemaid was because Jenny's mom said, you know, Jenny, we can't give you any more money, but we hate seeing the kids starve. Oh, what are we going to do? Well, we'll lend Lenchen to you, who Jenny grew up with. She could be the family nursemaid. So the Marxes took her in, didn't pay her anything, and then Marx got her pregnant behind Jenny's back. The child that she had, Marx refused to acknowledge that the child was his, of course refused to ever pay a penny of child support. And then Engels came in and said, you know what, I hate marriage, I'm never going to get married, I'm already a scandalous man. To save your marriage, let's just name him after me. I'll accept paternity. They called him Friedrich. In the manifesto, this book that just talks about sharing and helping each other and helping your fellow man, they wrote, abolition of the family, exclamation mark. Even the most radical flare up at this infamous proposal of the communists. In 1848, it's already considered an infamous proposal of the communists, the abolition of the family. All right, so this idea gets implemented in Bolshevik Russia, one of the most religious countries in the world, Russia at the time. The communists always take the most religious countries. North Korea, which is communist to this day, Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea, was called the Jerusalem of the East. Cuba was extraordinarily religious. They've had Cuba now for 59 years. The Bolsheviks take over. Who are these three? Lenin, Stalin, Trotsky. They take over in 1917. Civil War in 1918 to 1921 left 7 million Russian men, women, and children dead. By the way, that was after Russia in World War I lost more people than any other country in all of World War I. Just death, death, death. A good Polish friend of mine, Jan Wieniecki, I said to him, do you hate Russia because of what they've done to the Poles? And he said, no, I just feel sorry for the Russian people. No one has ever suffered as much as the Russian people. Then after this, 1918 to 21, 7 million dead in the Civil War, these guys take over, the Bolsheviks, and Russia gets communism for the next 70 years. The communists then came to America. The Communist Party started in Chicago in September 1919. When you joined Communist Party USA, which still exists, cpusa.org, you swore a loyalty oath. I pledge myself to rally the masses to defend not the United States, the Soviet Union, if you remember, of Communist Party USA. This was Stalin's Soviet Union in the 1930s. I pledge myself to remain at all times a vigilant and firm defender of the Leninist line of the party, the only line that ensures the triumph of Soviet power in the United States. They favored a USSA, they called it. Langston Hughes, the communist American poet who you guys all now read in public schools as a great civil rights leader, he was a communist. He said, put one more S in the USA, it will be the USSA when we take over. They called it a Soviet America. All right, how many people did they kill with this ideology? This is the Black Book of Communism, the Harvard University Press book, which came out in 1999. This book estimated that the communists were responsible for the deaths of over 100 million people between 1917 and the 1990s. By the way, that doesn't even include, for example, the number of abortions in China or in the Soviet Union. And they also published too early. I mean, North Koreans are still killing people. Here are the numbers according to the Black Book, a breakdown. By the way, that's Vladimir Lenin today in Lenin's tomb in Moscow. 20 million deaths in the Soviet Union. That figure is actually really conservative. The number's probably more like 60 to 70 million deaths. Alexander Yakovlev, who was a big reformer with Gorbachev in the late 1990s, said, Stalin alone annihilated 60 million people. So that's a conservative figure. The country that's the worst of all time, China, 65 million. It's probably more like 70 million plus. Cambodia. Who ran Cambodia during this time? Anyone know? Pol Pot, the Khmer Rouge. They killed 2 to 3 million people out of a population of 5 to 7 million in just 4 years in the late 1970s. That's the worst killing field in the history of humanity, right there. Here's some more numbers. In all, if you add up, probably the true numbers on the Soviet Union, the true numbers on China, you're looking at 140 million deaths from communist ideology, from the specter of communism. That would be like double the deaths of World War I and World War II combined. Yeah. Mephistopheles. Everything that exists deserves to perish. Did a hell of a good job with it. All right, how the Catholic Church responded. Now here's some good news. Our church was on this, man. On this. From the very beginning. 1846. Okay, remember, when was the Communist Manifesto published? You taking notes? 1848. Very good, very good. Pope Pius IX, who's pope from 1846 to 1878. Longest serving pope ever, other than Peter, right? So you have him, 32 years, 1846, 1878. His first encyclical in December 1846 is on communism, called Qui Pluribus. All right, look at this line. Communism is absolutely contrary to the natural law itself, and if implemented, would utterly destroy the rights, property, and possessions of all men and even society itself. Wow. 2 years before the book was even published. When I first read that, I was a Protestant. And of course, Cold War communism was like my area. And I thought, how did the Catholic Church know that? I mean, that's incredible. The manifesto wasn't even published yet. I mean, it's like these guys had the Holy Spirit speaking to them or something. It's unbelievable. How could they possibly have known that? 1849, Pius IX wrote this: both socialism and communism are wicked theories. America Magazine, the Jesuit magazine, in the summer of 2019, published an article called The Catholic Case for Communism. Yeah, nice job, guys. Right? Nice job, guys. There is no Catholic case for communism. The Catholic case is against communism. What are they going to write next? The Catholic case for atheism? Right? Catholic case for Satanism? 1878. Okay, who was Pope after Pius IX? Leo XIII. 1878 to 1903. 25 years. But think of that, you had two popes from 1846 to 1903. What's his famous encyclical? Sister Social Justice. We'll be teaching this at the nearest Catholic college near you. Rerum Novarum. Rerum Novarum. All right. 1878, the first year of his pontificate, Quod Apostolici. Communism is the fatal plague which insinuates itself into the very marrow of human society, only to bring it to its ruin. Good stuff. Back to Qui Pluribus. Communism is a dark design of men in the clothing of sheep, while inwardly ravening wolves, right? After taking their captives gently, they mildly bind them and then kill them in secret. That's an amazing statement, because I don't know how even in 1840, I don't know if that was honestly even happening yet in 1846. But it would happen about 100 million times after 1917. They make men fly in terror from all practice of religion, and they cut down and dismember the sheep of the Lord. Communism is a filthy medley of errors. Their writings teach sinning and spread widespread, disgusting infection. They are filled with deceit and cunning. That's your church. Gee, I wonder why the communists hated the Catholic Church so much. They knew these guys were onto it. Holy Spirit had to have been. Had to have been. Here's Leo XIII. Christmas Day, 1878, issued an encyclical on socialism. The first Christmas of his pontificate. Tell Sister Social Justice about this one, all right? You might want to take a picture of this slide, all right? If you've got that kid who's like, well, I'm a Catholic, but I'm a socialist Catholic, all right? Listen. We speak of that sect of men who, under various and almost barbarous names, are called socialists, communists, or nihilists, and who, spread all over the world, are bound together by a wicked confederacy. No longer seek the shelter of secret meetings, but openly and boldly march forth in the light of the day. Strive to bring what they have long been planning, an overthrow of all civil society. By the way, for people like, well, the church is being a little incendiary here and further exaggerating the overthrow of all civil society. What are these Catholics coming up with this stuff? Read the Communist Manifesto. What does the end of it say? The forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. The popes read the manifesto, right? The kid coming out of the university isn't reading it. They're just being told what it says, right? These guys actually read it. By the way, I should have brought it with me. It's like 60 pages. You could read it in a couple of hours. There's no excuse for not reading it if you're going to comment on it. They debased the natural union of man and woman held sacred even among barbarous peoples. And its bond, the family. Wow, where'd they come up with that? Oh, the church making up stuff about communism. Remember, the manifesto says abolition of the family. They read the book. For sister social justice. Quadragesimo anno. All right? You got it? May 1931, Pope Pius XI. By the way, what does it mean, quadragesimo anno? Where are my Latin people? Paulo, I'm going to embarrass you.
Later.
Good, outstanding. 40 years later. 40 years after what? Verum Novarum. Very good. Very good. And I don't think I have it in here, the encyclical by John Paul that said, well, hold on to that. Maybe I do. This is Pius XI. Religious socialism. Christian socialism. Oh, it's okay. I'm a Christian socialist. Christian socialism. These are contradictory terms. No one can be at the same time a good Catholic and a true socialist. You can't. And I love this statement because people say, yeah, but socialism and communism talks about helping the poor and sharing. All right. He says here, even if you think that's true, all right, those who want to be apostles among socialists ought to profess Christian truth, whole and entire, openly and sincerely, and not connive at error in any way. If they truly want to be heralds of the gospel, let them strive to show to socialists that the socialist claims, so far as they are just, if they are far more strongly supported by the principles of Christian faith and Christian charity. You want to help the poor? Do what Jesus would do. Former Protestant, WWJD. What would Jesus do? Not WWMD. What would Marx do? Right? Marx would blow the whole thing up. Right? Everything that exists deserves to perish. Doesn't sound like Jesus. My favorite, Divini Redemptoris, March 1937 by Pope Pius XI. My favorite encyclical. Remember, American Magazine, the Jesuit publication in July 2019, published an article called The Catholic Case for Communism. There's a big picture there of Evo Morales, the communist leader of Bolivia, handing a communist crucifix to Pope Francis. Okay? Communism is a satanic scourge. Godless, of perversity, poison, fury, intrinsically wrong, collectivistic terrorism replete with hate, a catastrophe. Marxists are the powers of darkness. The evil we must combat, and this is exactly right, is primarily at its origin of the spiritual order. Michael Knowles wrote the foreword to my book, The Devil and Karl Marx, and he said, you know, people want to say, well, communism is wrong because it distorts markets. He said, no, first of all, it does distort markets. But communism is wrong because it's evil. It's spiritually wrong, not just economically. From this polluted source, the monstrous emanations of the communistic system flow with satanic logic. Your church called communism satanic. Well, those must have been like right-wing popes. What about a good pope, a progressive pope like St. John the 23rd? St. John the 23rd. No Catholic could subscribe even to moderate socialism, said the Pope. Socialism takes no account of any objective other than that of material well-being. It places too severe a restraint on religious liberty. But doesn't the Bible preach communism? The book of Acts, right? By the way, it just kills me that according to the lectionary, we have to read this like every spring during Easter. And my email box just gets flooded with people saying, we read Acts 4:32 at Mass today, and my priest said that this is socialism. Acts 2:45, all who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their property and possessions and divide them all according to their needs. By the way, what did Mark say? From each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. He was great because Marx had been a Christian at one point. His family was Jewish. He converted to Christianity, baptized a Christian about the age of 5, 1823, 1824. But he was great at twisting verses like this. Acts 4:32, 4:35. The community of believers was of one heart and mind, and no one claimed any of his possessions was his own, but they had everything in common. There was no needy person among them. For those who, by the way, here's a clue why this isn't communism, owned property, all right, they're able to own. Under communism, they wouldn't be able to own property, all right, to be able to give it and share it and sell some of them and help people to begin with. Or houses would sell them, bring the proceeds of the sale, and put them at the feet of the apostles, and they were distributed each according to need. All right. Even Pope Francis has corrected this one. He says, this is not communism. This is pure Christianity. You've seen what communism is. Abolition of the family, right? Abolition of the present state of things. Capital. All that other junk, all right? This is first century apostles, Christians, living together in community and coming together on their own and deciding to help one another out. Selling some of their stuff, some of their property, giving it to their people in need. And above all, this is a community of people doing this voluntarily as Christian believers. All right? They don't think religion is the opiate of the masses. They're not destroying religion. They're not atheists. They're coming together out of Christian love, where religion is permitted, the family is permitted, Christianity is permitted, property is permitted, and agreeing voluntarily on their own in community to share stuff. Communism would have a central government that covers 12 time zones in the USSR, telling 100% of everybody in the country who don't have the right to religion, property, or anything else to do everything according to what the government is commanding them to do. A completely different situation. And people say things too like, well, look at the Franciscans in some of these orders. I mean, they all share stuff. They give up their private. Yeah, but that's under the teachings of St. Francis. And what percentage of Americans are Franciscans, right? Like 0.000000001%, right? I mean, that's a community of believers getting together and doing that on their own, voluntarily. All right? This is like the year 60. Communism comes along in 1848. All right? So that's not communism. All right. Let me just hit a couple. I wrote a whole book on Reagan and John Paul II and what they did together to destroy communism. Maybe we could talk about that in the Q&A. All right? A couple other quotes. Pope Benedict. I want you to see how this goes from all popes, from the very beginning of when communism started to the current pope today. Pope Benedict. Marx's problem. He presumed with the expropriation of the ruling class, with the fall of political power and the socialization of the means of production, that a new Jerusalem would be realized. His big mistake, he thought that once the economy would be put right, everything else would be put right. His real error is materialism. Bishop, you had talked about in your homily, what was the phrase about, intoxication, right? Intoxicated. Marx was intoxicated with materialism. Marx was intoxicated with envy, right? With greed, wanting other people's stuff. The Pope is saying here, it's not possible to redeem man by purely economic means. So it's as if the Marxists believed, it's like what Christ told Satan. Man does not live by bread alone. But by what? Every word from the mouth of God, right? But the communists believe to them it's as if, okay, there is no God, you don't need God. We do live by bread alone. Augustine said there's a God-shaped vacuum in each of us. He didn't say there's a dollar-shaped vacuum in each of us. If you can just fill that vacuum with bread or dollars or capital or material, you'll be happy. No, we are spiritual people. Benedict said, John Paul II said, above all, Marxism was wrong, not just spiritually, not just economically, anthropologically it was wrong. They failed to understand human nature. They failed to truly understand man, humanity. Even Pope Francis agrees. December 2013, the Marxist ideology is wrong. But I have met many Marxists in my life who are good people. Well, that's the problem. All right. He hasn't been a very good anti-communist, I'll put it that way. But to his credit, right, he has said categorically, the Marxist ideology is wrong. Wrap up with just a few slides here. Modern Marxism, today it's being applied to culture, critical theory, the Frankfurt School, Antonio Gramsci, the Italian who died in prison, thrown into prison by Mussolini in 1937. And he was separate from the Frankfurt School, the Germans, Herbert Marcuse, Max Horkheimer, Theodor Adorno. These guys pushed a form of Freudian Marxism. By the way, that's got to be the worst idea of all time, is to take the ideas of Marx, the craziest crackpot theorist of the 19th century, and marry them to the ideas of Freud, of all things, right? I mean, whoever thought of that should be just carted straight off to the rubber room, all right? It's like, I got an idea. Let's take Marx and Freud and put them together, right? And it's like the worst. Talk about a marriage not made in heaven. The 1960s neo-Marxists in America, the Weather Underground, Bill Ayers, Bernardine Dohrn, Mark Rudd, they're all still around. They're teaching. They're all professors today in our universities. Angela Davis, who ran for Vice President of the United States on the Communist Party USA ticket multiple times, the prize student of Herbert Marcuse. Patrice Cullors, the founder of Black Lives Matter, her book, the intro, is written by Angela Davis. Angela Davis was her inspiration. Race-based Marxism, right? Critical race theory. I say here, choose MLK, not CRT. Martin Luther King Jr. said, we are to be judged by the content of our character, not the color of our skin. Critical race theory, right, is taking, they borrow the race-based Marxism borrows the Marxist superstructure of oppressed versus oppressor, proletariat versus bourgeoisie, and simplifies it according to race, black versus white. And incredibly simplistically, quite racist, right? They put you in one of two categories. Even as it's hard to define anyone as just black or white. My youngest son, where are you here? Half and half. All right, right, Ben? But we're all made up of a whole bunch of different, look at my Ancestry.com profile, we're all over the place, all right? You can't just put people black and white and say, if you're black, you're oppressed, if you're white, the oppressor. Tell Oprah and Kobe Bryant, all right, that they're oppressed, right? And then the white homeless guy that he's their oppressor. And they say, well, huh? Yeah, well, because he's white. No, I mean, that's incredibly racist and simplistic. But that's the oppressed versus oppressor model that they all do. They do it today by race, by culture, by gender. There are gender Marxists, right? They do it to some form of LGBTQ thing, whatever it is they come up with. So today, Marxism has become this sort of wokeism where you're always searching for new victim groups. In the original Marxist, classical Marxist model, all right, it was the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. Today, it's another new victim group. And the victim group needs to be, their consciousness needs to be raised to inform them that they're the victim group. Even if they say, well, I'm Kobe Bryant. I was raised by well-off parents in Italy and stuff, and I'm worth like $200 million. I'm not oppressed. Oh, yes, you are. And let me tell you why, and let me tell you who your oppressor is. Right? But it's all about that, the latest victim group. All right, I'll close up with this. Catholics must reject these noxious, quite literally divisive ideas. They divide you into different groups. In my book on the church and slavery, I close with a beautiful statement from Archbishop Gomez, who's really good on this subject. We are neither Jew nor Gentile, male nor female, slave nor free, bourgeoisie or proletariat, right? We are all one in Christ Jesus. The only group category that should define us is that of Christians, Catholics, children of God. One more slide. To wrap this all up, this was a battle that our church won from 1846, 1848 to when the Berlin Wall came down in 1989. All right, but the battle now is to fight these new forms of Marxism that are a lot harder to pin down. And especially because a lot of the people that are influenced by these newer models don't even realize they're being influenced by it, right? And if you told them, it's like, what you're doing there is kind of a classic oppressed versus oppressor scheme, that, critical race theory, they'll just look at you like you're out of your mind. Probably call you names, tell you that you're crazy. It's harder to pin down, harder to explain. But the Catechism says this, my favorite part of the Catechism, section 409. It was updated, right, in the pontificate of John Paul II with Cardinal Ratzinger at the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. The whole of man's history has been the story of dour combat with the powers of evil. Stretching, so our Lord tells us, from the very dawn of history until the last day. It didn't end in 1989 when the Berlin Wall fell down. It didn't end on Christmas Day in 1991 when the Soviet Union imploded. It just took on other forms that we're battling today. Finding himself in the midst of the battlefield, man has to struggle to do what is right, often at great cost to himself. And sometimes you have to stand up against these ideologies, even when you're going to get called names. I don't want to be standing there someday before the pearly gates, and the good Lord says, in this moment, and here it is, I'll play it out for you right here. They were all saying this and doing this, and you didn't defend me. Why? Well, Jesus, I didn't want to be called a hater on Twitter. Right? You'd be like, that's really pathetic. Here, let me show you another scene. Here's St. Barbara. Okay? Here's watch her be ripped to shreds by lions in the Colosseum, right? Right? And you didn't want to be called a hater on Twitter. Sitting at home in your living room in your boxer shorts on a computer. How ridiculous, right? We have to fight. We have to fight against these ideologies. And this guy here took a bullet from the communists. Who's this guy? Fulton Sheen, my favorite. Lord, why did I not even quote Fulton Sheen here today? Right? They all stood against it. So we have to stand against these powers of darkness in our time. That's my job, and that's your job too, whether you like it or not. It's part of your duty. John Paul II gave a great homily on Christmas Day about the duty of our talents, right? Boy, the Lord is really severe in that parable to the person who didn't use his talents properly. That's right. You have talents, you have to use them. The gate is narrow, correct? Right? It's narrow for a purpose. It's hard to get in. You need to strive to be a saint and to do what's right. Look what Saint Sharbel stood against, right? All right, very good. I'll stop there and take any questions you have. Thank you.